The purpose of Wealth Talk is to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain you on the subject of building your wealth. WealthBuilders recommends you should always take independent financial, tax, or legal advice before making any decisions around your finances.
Welcome to episode 119 of Wealth Talk. My name is Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders, and I'm joined today by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Chris. Good to be with you again today.
Here we are. So we are focusing on a really important aspect today, which is education, which for anyone that knows the WealthBuilders model, certainly all of our members should know, education is the first stage in the Wheel of Wealth, which is a fundamental aspect of the wealth building process.
Absolutely right. And, nobody can argue that education is the cornerstone of everything. As you say, Chris, many times, nobody's born anything, are they? You're not a born investor. You're not a born business owner. You're not a born property investor. You have to learn everything. And that learning means education. And while we don't particularly say what type of education is right, we just know that any education needs to be fit for purpose, good value for money, and gives a platform on which people can take action rather than a platform for people just to get more information.
And, education is changing. Obviously, everything's always evolving, but in the education space, I remember, as I'm sure many listeners will do, Robert Kiyosaki and reading his book, Rich Dad and Cash Flow Quadrant, he talks about the movement through the ages and how we're very firmly now in the information age. And, even in the last 18 months, we've seen how COVID has really changed the way that people learn. People have really got themselves online. Perhaps people who weren't so familiar with what a webinar is probably are now webinared out, right?
Yeah. And, there's so many different languages and things that have come up even in joking, you're on mute every time somebody's on Zoom. Just the language, people now, just like when people used to clean their carpets and now they call it hoovering. When you have a meeting, you're Zooming, so lots of things happening that shows that we definitely have a complete shift, haven't we? To people being more willing and more comfortable with getting information, consuming information online. I'm a very avid listener. I like to multitask either on podcasts or books, and I listen to them on Audible. Although I do have some books, increasingly I like to listen to them because I can, take things in when I'm doing something else, and therefore gives you leverage on your time, which again is what all of this is doing, is giving us all more leverage.
Yeah. Now, we obviously love creating content at WealthBuilders, and we've got lots of free content. And then obviously we've got paid for content inside of the academy. And it's really down to people to pick and choose what they want and, take that at their own pace. And obviously we're committed to always creating more content and a podcast every week. And similarly with our guest today, who is Danny Inman, who's one of the founders of the Prosperity Network. And Danny set up Prosperity only a year ago. So, amidst the whole lockdown period. But we definitely share values in the way that Danny approaches education.
Yes, we share values, definitely. We've got some common things we want to share with the world. And one of those is always giving exceptional value and focusing on delivering value. And we don't like bad value. And I think we see bad value everywhere. Certainly pointing no fingers anywhere at anyone. But we know that, the property training industry has had some bad raps in there for the upsell of education. Similarly, in a different industry altogether, we've seen the financial services industry, right? So, there's more information to be able to manage money online, but the prices still remain for the vast majority too high. And we think the time has come for that to change, and it is changing. And within a few years, just like the change in electric vehicles, more and more people will be finding more services delivered online, and that the real value of other people is to build distinctions, to help people select and curate good quality information. And I think Danny's done a good job. Let's have a listen to what Danny has to say.
Danny, welcome to Wealth Talk today.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the show, Danny. And we're talking today about why property education had to change. So it's an interesting topic, and I hope our listeners will enjoy some of the conversation we have around this. So I think first off, let's hear a little bit about you, Danny, so our listeners understand your journey and your company, Prosperity Network.
Awesome. So this is probably a potentially controversial subject, but one that I'm quite passionate about, having been around education, property education, for over a decade, from student to investor that then went back to become a mentor and a speaker. And now at this stage, we run our own networking and our own community and education community. Started in August last year, so started in the middle of a pandemic, and started because we felt the industry had changed so much and a lot of the offerings hadn't changed with it. So we've gone from 0 to 600 subscribers. It's a subscription-based model, so think Netflix rather than Blockbuster. We've got hundreds of hours of education on a training portal. We have weekly community calls. We're now getting together again, which is wonderful. So we've got our first networking day on the 7th. 150 plus people are coming to that. So very busy and very active community, but focused on keeping people updated, relevant information, relevant education based on today's market, based on today's activity. It's gone really well. I think it's been taken so well because of what we're going to talk about, why the industry needs to change. And I think the environment and the market is seeing that as well, and are reacting pretty well to that. So yeah, we've done all right in the first year. Yeah,
and in terms of kind of some of the property projects that you focus on yourself, Danny. So obviously you're an investor. Is that residential, commercial? What kind of areas are you focusing on?
Combination of. So throughout my 12 years, started sourcing, building portfolios for other parties, then with buy-to-lets, and have slowly stepped up over the last 10 to 12 years to now hitting, we're developers primarily now. So we're conversion specialists. We'll take ex-commercial buildings, convert to residential, ranging from 6 units to 160 units, full in between. We generally have a pipeline of £25 million active at any time in development value. But yeah, just very much walking the walk, I think. I think that's a big part of the education world, is that the people talking about it are doing what they're talking about. And, we're very consciously aware of that. Being somebody who's vocal in the property world, it does definitely keep my knife sharpened, that I know I have to be out there doing deals and practicing what we're preaching. So yeah, very active, mainly conversions. But yeah, just love the property world. So.
Well, we know property is one of the most popular pillars of the 7 pillars that we teach at WealthBuilders, Danny. And, none of us were born property investors. We've all had to learn it at some stage. So everyone really has started at the same point, right? So let's think about, what's the typical route for people that, from your experience, that you see kind of first being aware of property as an asset class and how they can generate recurring income from property, and then how property can help them to achieve financial independence, and where does that journey take them?
Yeah, I think there's a complete mixed range. I mean, myself and my business partners are very interesting dynamic, because I'm taught in a classroom. I've done the conventional education on a property level, the whole seminar world, and all of that we'll talk about during this session. Whereas he caught his education out in the field as working in construction, working as an estate agent, and then owning an estate agency. He's sort of done his process there, but we've kind of merged in the middle. I'm a big believer in education, and I think education of some description is right for the majority. I think people like him without a structured education behind them are probably considerably rarer than people like me coming through our environment and seeing a lot of success. So I think education increases your chances of success, and he acknowledges that. He's more of an anomaly in his space of being an uneducated investor in the way that we know it than I am in my space. So I think it increases your chances. I think now more than ever, there's different routes to get into it and different types of education. Obviously, we've talked about how we're trying to do things different in the Prosperity Network versus the conventional way. I did the conventional or the old school route of go to a 2-hour free seminar, get upsold to a 3-day, get upsold to a training package, and be in that environment. And it worked for me. It definitely worked for me. And I credit a lot of my success to that space at that time. I think that's the key thing. I think what's happened here and why we're talking about the need for change is that the market has changed and the education didn't really change with it. The market got much, much bigger. It got much more commonly available that you could get access to these trainings and you could go and pay your 10, 15, 20,000 pounds to get trained. And I think that industry became a bit of a sausage factory. It wasn't like that when I came through. It was a genuine, the internet hadn't really kicked off as big as it is today. Social media was certainly nowhere near as active. So property investment was a little bit of a secret sauce. You needed to pay the money to get the secret sauce to go and do it. I think as the internet and Facebook groups and all of these other places you can get information from has developed, the education was still acting like it was selling a secret sauce, and that wasn't the thing of value anymore. The community and structure and ideas and accountability and network, that's more important now, I believe, than the information that you can kind of pull together elsewhere, but just maybe not as in a structured way. So yeah, that's what I would say. I think we went through the old school approach, but the model arguably needs to change now based on the fact the whole market and the environment's changed.
Yeah, it does sound like it definitely coincided with the explosion of social media. That really did sort of change the game.
Yeah, big time. And yeah, huge. And people are so, content marketing is such a thing now. It's something that we massively engage in. So we're always putting information out, market updates out, value out. 10, 12 years ago, you didn't get any of that. You didn't get an investor's perspective on the market unless you were meeting that investor one-on-one. Whereas now there's so many investors putting their, views out on the market, some good, some bad. And obviously education lets you pick between what's the good and the bad. But yeah, it's completely different to when 2009 I started my education. It's a completely different world now, completely different world.
Yeah, so it's so much easier now for obviously everyone to get their face out there, their name out there. And, we don't want to talk negatively. We want to encourage people who are, taking their first steps into this world and, getting their first property, right? That's a big step for people. Get that first property, that first bit of income. But it can fuel what can be, I guess, you see people online and perhaps they're sharing a message out of good intentions, but they perhaps don't have the experience to really be able to fully support others in the way that they might need. And I think that's something we need to be mindful of when we're choosing who we have as a coach or a mentor. Any sort of specific thoughts on that, Danny?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so passionate about this because, it's so much easier to do what you want to do following somebody who's done it and done it recently. So I'm a huge believer in coaching, support, I'm passionate behind it. I think the big issue came because the industry blew up so quickly. There was a sudden spell around 2013, 14, probably to 16, 17, where all of a sudden it was everywhere and everybody was doing property training and there was loads of different options. And I think what happened was the demand started to outweigh the ability to supply it. And I'm talking about the businesses I've been around historically that I was a student with and other companies I've seen. So because there was so many people coming through, they started to have to plug gaps. They had to put people in arguably too soon to then pass it on. And it started to dilute the whole quality of it all effectively. And that really passed its way down. But then the other big issue is as soon as you start to put people on a pedestal, people want to stay on that pedestal. So they will inflate their performance. They will, enhance on the truth. And it all became very competitive. What if one company had been to Tenerife, the next one would tell you they've been to 11 Tenerife, and everything had to be really, really, really outlandish and big claims to try and get things over the line and get sales agreed, and it became the industry, what was a genuinely good intended industry, it started to become a bit of a parody of itself, in that the people that were preaching financial freedom were reliant upon the pay of the people that were paying them to preach financial freedom, and it became a huge irony about the whole thing. So I don't think it was malintended at the start when this transition happened. I think that businesses grew too quick because the demand flooded all of a sudden, and they plugged gaps that they then never got round to improving, because the business was growing, and it just diluted the industry, in my opinion. And I think that's what bothers most people about our industry, is that there's a genuine belief that a lot of the people teaching aren't doing, or certainly aren't doing as much as they are potentially projecting, and that seems a bit disingenuous to me, in this environment of teaching wealth and how to get to financial freedom and how to, reduce your hours at work and not be dependent on another party for your income or lifestyle. It just became a bit of a hypocritical space, and I started to step back from that environment with other businesses that I was working with at that point, because I just thought, I don't know, I'm comfortable anymore in this space. That I think there's an ethical issue with me selling a product, or anybody selling a product that ultimately might not be what is sold. And as competition grew, claims had to get bigger to get the sale. And as more information was out there and you could get access to more information, what they were offering had to be harder sold. And I'm always uncomfortable, very uncomfortable with a hard sell. I always think if your product's good, someone else will sell it for you 9 times out of 10, or you don't really have to hard pitch it. You shouldn't have to. And I think our space, property education especially, became a bit renowned for hard pitches and selling dreams, which, again, without being negative, I've tried to explain the reason I think it transitioned to that. And I think it's transitioning away. I do. I think it had to. I think that's what our conversation's about ultimately.
Yeah. And so take us back to the time when you sat down with obviously your partners, Danny, and, you started thinking, well, hang on, can we do this better? And if we were going to launch something, how would we do it differently?
So being brutally honest, I didn't want to do it. I'm a property developer. I don't feel like I'm an educator as such. I feel well placed to talk about property, what we've done, what we're doing, what other people we've coached have done, and get them involved. But I don't see myself as a property educator. I see myself as a property developer who talks about property. So I didn't want to. And in fact, I proposed to other parties that they should do it. I actually told other parties that I think you should do this, because I think the old school way of doing things is like an oil tanker, and it's slowly sinking, and you need a lifeboat. And I thought that this way, in exactly the same way as Netflix versus Blockbuster, where the whole world is moving towards subscription, where you have to give more for less. You have to give a lot of value now for less money in our world, in my opinion. Otherwise, you start to get criticized, where people can learn or watch or do things at their own speed, can come in, can come out. I thought the industry was every industry, I think, is moving towards that environment. And the other businesses that I was speaking to about, I think you maybe should go down this angle, because I didn't want to be the one to do it, quite selfishly. They just built a business of such a size that they couldn't transition. It was impossible. It had now become dependent upon big turnovers with big expenses, and they just couldn't build this very low cost but high margin business on the side of it. And ultimately the two models bastardize each other, really. My model is saying you need to do this model because this one doesn't work. So the guys that were doing that model couldn't really build that model alongside it as well. So I understand the reasons they didn't. So I did it out of frustration, is the honest answer. I sat there going, the industry needs this. the people who could do it, I don't think are going to do it unless they're forced to. As a result, will do it. And actually, pretty much the whole industry is starting to move a little bit our way now because of COVID. So this was just before COVID. This was February 2020 when I was saying you need to move more online, bring your overheads down so you can bring the costs down, all of the discussions that we had. COVID's made me look like an absolute genius, but it's fast-tracked what was happening anyway, in my opinion. I absolutely never thought COVID was going to have the impact it did. But it's just put the fast forward button on what our industry was already doing. So yeah, started out of frustration, didn't really want to. Now, glad that I have. But yeah, at the time, it was a frustrated beginning.
So let's look at some of the aspects of prosperity that, are kind of the new way of thinking. First one, I guess, is it's a subscription model.
I think low cost, very low cost, very high volume. I think, or high value, sorry. I think that's probably a transition. I think some of the education companies I've seen historically was always about how much can we get away with charging going in versus how little do we have to give them going in, and then how many times can we upsell them once they're in there. And in a business model, that completely makes sense. But in the information era, it's quite contrary to what the customer actually wants and debatably needs in a lot of cases. So we very much changed like that. I think the other big thing is we're so soft sell. It's kind of, here's the value, it's up to you. Like it starts at 60 quid a month. If you don't get value out of that, you've done nothing basically. You've took none of the information and took no action. That's the only way you can't get value at starting price of 60 quid a month. And they get a phenomenal amount for that. More focus probably on community, network, value than sales. I think there's an argument that on a business level, I think a lot of the older school businesses will look at us and go, hey, you're too cheap, you give away too much, and how are you making money? But the way that we run things can keep margins low and value high. And I think that's a big change in this industry. A lot of the older businesses had huge offices, or they'd have, all of their events would be held at a big hotel or conference center or whatever, and they'd be paying thousands and thousands of pounds for that to put on the same education 10 times a year. So they'd be paying people 10 times to present the same thing 10 times a year. And it's Netflix versus Blockbuster is the only way I can really describe why Blockbuster died, was because you've got to probably pay too much. You only get it once, and if you want it again, you've got to pay for it again. And Netflix is an entirely different model, as we all know. So I think that's the way the whole education is going. I know you guys do the same with a subscription approach, don't you? Absolutely.
Yeah. Again, it just all ties into really looking at those pillars, right? And as a business, you want recurring income as well. That's it's. You say it's that menu of giving people what they want. They can choose, I can see how that works. And we were discussing earlier, weren't we? It's all about mindset as well, not just the education, but two people can attend the same course or, go through the same amount of training. And in 3 to 5 years, one person will be financially independent and the other person will be exactly where they were when they started. Why is that?
I genuinely think it's their expectations going in for most people. And that's another issue I've had in the industry. When we were talking earlier about having the claims getting a bit bigger because they had to sell, I think sometimes the difficulty of success is undersold. In a lot of cases, it's massively undersold. In the whole get rich quick, financial freedom in 7 days, in a year you can leave your job. It's not real for most people. It's being said to sell something that then leads to disappointment. If you get somebody expecting X and the potential of X by doing only Y and Z, and they don't hit that, then they'll just drop off. There'll be a natural fall off. So I'm sort of comically anti get rich quick. Anyone that follows me on social media will say I attack it quite a bit, because I think it's the most dangerous thing in the world. The instant gratification wish from property or business. It can take you 6 months to buy a property at the minute. So, financial freedom in 7 days, I'm not getting an answer from most solicitors in 7 days. So, it's just not, it's a complete miss sale. And I think that's it. I think the people that go in with their eyes open and are willing to make huge sacrifices for between 3 and 5 years are always the ones that stand the best chance. The guys that are hoping just because they've paid 5, 10, 20 grand or whatever they've paid for a course, and they do a little bit and it doesn't quite work out for them, or they get upset when they get the first no, or when they hit their first problem, or if one deal doesn't work, it's the end of the world for them. Those guys have a very limited chance. So you see, you hit the nail on the head. It's mindset, but I think it's mostly mindset going in, setting your expectations on, I'm willing to graft like a bastard for the next 5 years so that I don't have to for the next 50. And I think that's the right mindset going into something like this. It definitely loses me some sales. I'm aware of that, because I don't say you can do this really quickly and it's going to be easy for you. But I think I get the right kind of sales and I don't piss people off because I don't get calls from people saying, you promised me this was going to be a walk in the park. So I think that's the biggest thing. Mindset, 100%. How you react to adversity, 100%. And the expectations of how hard it's actually going to be are probably the 3 things I think have separated successful people and less successful people on the back of any education.
And final words really, Danny. Anyone who's listening now, perhaps they're right at the start of their property journey, and what would be some tips looking back on your progress over the last 12 to 15 years? What would you say to them now in terms of being a successful investor in property? So many. It's harder than you think, and it's definitely harder than you'll be told. That's number one. But it's incredibly possible, and it's much easier and much quicker than a job for 40 years. So it's better than the alternative, is what I would always say. But you have to appreciate it's difficult. It's not what happens to you; it's how you react to it. That's a massive one. Shit goes wrong for us every single week in property. We have a problem, and you'll feel like quitting because we've done very well in property. And there's once a week where I have this conversation with myself where I think, is this still worth it now or what? But you very quickly shake out of it. But they're all natural feelings. Everybody looks at very successful people and thinks, you don't get emotional. You don't want to give up. Everybody feels the same way. It's hard work, but worth it. I think that they're the biggest tips. Property investors win by timing in the market, so timing the right strategy at the right time, buying in the right way, but also time in the market. And the longer you spend in the market in property, as long as you have longevity and you look at it as a long-term play, you'll thank yourself massively in the future. So anyone who's feeling the pinch and the pain at the moment with the market conditions, again, your advice just be play the long game.
Right strategy in the right market. It's so cyclical. This year I've spent a lot of time being an I told you so idiot, to be honest, because the market's very predictable and people within the market are very predictable. Everybody that was saying the market was going to plummet because of COVID, just very mal-informed. We went into COVID with record lows of supply and record highs of demand and a shitload of money. And we came out of COVID in exactly the same position after a 6 to 8 weeks bit of panic. And that's why the markets flew. And I did tell you. And I know a lot of educators predicted the great crash because that sells and fear sells and all of that. But we literally sat there at the start of COVID and went, the market's very predictable. Just calm yourself down. And I think that's a reassuring thing about property. I find that very, very, very reassuring, is that if you know what to look for, the trends are pretty obvious and it's all generally happened before. And the resilience of the property market is, if a pandemic and shutting down for 3 or 4 months can't stop it, then it's a pretty solid market to be in ultimately. So Yeah, I think if you're feeling it at the minute, most people are feeling it at the minute because it's harder to buy because there's so much competition. In our environment and in the Prosperity Network, we're just saying you're just going to have to change your approach a little bit. What worked pre-COVID might be a bit more challenging now, but there are other strategies that you can employ in a growing market that will benefit. So I guess that's where the knowledge and community and support comes in ultimately.
Well, it's been great hearing your take and your views, Danny, and always enjoy listening to you. If someone wants to follow your social media and hear more of your opinions, where's the best place for them to go?
My very strongly worded opinions. Yeah, Danny Inman Property everywhere on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Most of my activities on Instagram now. I'm a big believer in that environment. So yeah, Danny Inman Property.
Okay, and if they want to check out Prosperity, what's the URL?
Yeah, prosperitynetwork.co.uk and Prosperity Network _ on Instagram. The team put out tons. We've talked about putting out a load of value. The team's put out loads of value on Instagram especially. So yeah, Prosperity Network _ on Instagram, prosperitynetwork.co.uk if you want to check it out.
Great. Danny, thanks so much for being a great guest on Wealth Talk today.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you.
Okay, some really good points there from Danny. We'll start diving into those in a second. Do you enjoy that one, Kevin?
Very much enjoyed his enthusiasm. Sometimes I have to say, slightly over enthusiastic with his language, but we don't mind that. We can forgive him that because his intention was to deliver with passion and purpose. And I think put that to one side and read into the content. Forgive him the odd expletive.
Yeah, real and authentic, which was definitely the basis of that conversation. Okay, so before we do start pulling out some of the wealth lessons that we've talked about there, let's quickly head over to Trustpilot. We've obviously had a summer break and we've had reviews coming in. So let's pull out one from Claire. And Claire says, thank you. I've worked with WealthBuilders and specifically Paul Brooks for over 2 years now on my SSAS journey. My case was fairly complex, and Paul guided and supported me every step of the way, from looking into creating a wider family trust, helping me to build business plans for the SSAS, which has really helped to give me a clear vision, and being available to bounce questions off. I've really enjoyed working with the team. Thanks.
Very good. Well, Paul leads the SSAS team very, very well indeed, and that team's expanding, and we've got some new additions to the team, 2 new additions to the team over the summer. So we're thrilled and delighted with that. So we'll go from strength to strength. But talking about strength, there was some very strong thoughts and feelings and opinions from Mr. Danny Inman.
There were indeed. Yeah, one of the things Danny said, which I really like, was the difficulty of success is massively undersold. And I guess this ties in with the get rich quick, all of these kind of things that not we, but sometimes people associate with education and training. And look, we know it does exist. And hopefully that's being stamped out because of, people now providing more value. And he referred to the Netflix blockbuster model that, you have to deliver more value at lower cost now. That's kind of what people are expecting.
Well, I think that's true. But I think, one must be very careful, though, about really as I said at the beginning, the education, Chris, is a platform to action taking. And I think all too often the value of the education is sold, not the importance of taking action as a result of getting some education. And he talks, about that, doesn't he? And says, people will tell you what they tell you, but it's going to be harder than you think, and it's harder than you've been told. It's hard. Well, it is. Being wealthy is not easy. It's doable. We have our own plan, don't we? We kind of talk about it. 60 days to create a plan, 60 months to execute the plan. Well, that's a lot better than working a lifetime, trading time for money, and having all the uncertainty that comes with being much older and much more vulnerable. So I think we're not saying it's just a matter of time. You've got to put up with some of the things. In a way, Chris, you've got to be wealthy. I've just thought of a new little acronym for you, Chris.
Let me jot it down.
Yeah. It's probably not one that might gain traction, but we'll see. But I just thought about it when I listened to the podcast. and listen to his content. I think in order to be wealthy, you've got to be completely mad. You have to be MAD. Well, what do you mean? And what do you mean by that, Kev? Well, first of all, and I think Dan touched on it, you have to have the right mindset when you go in. You have to know it's going to be tough. You have to know there are going to be challenges, and you have to know that you're willing to put the time in to do it. That's the M. The A is you're going to get adversity. You're going to get stop-starts. You're going to get things that change. You're going to get change in the economy. You're going to get change in tax. You're going to get changes in the ability for even stock to be delivered so you can build things if you're in the development thing. You're going to get adversity. And through that adversity, you have to stay determined to and know that if you keep following the plan, and yes, you have to be flexible with that plan. We know that. We've seen people pivot and change. But if you have that determination, you will see it through. And everybody who has those three things, everybody who is mad, will become wealthy. And I'm delighted to be as mad as a hatter.
I like that one. I was trying to guess what the D was going to be. I thought it could be dynamic, but no, determined. That fits very nicely. Okay, so yeah, I think many similarities really with obviously what Danny and the Prosperity Network are doing and what we're doing at Wealth Builders. It's all about community. It's all about good value. It's about connection. It's about great quality education. So yeah, we support Danny. And many of our members I know working with Danny as well, and feedback's always great. So hopefully some of the words resonated with you listening today. And as we said earlier, Kevin, we're not knocking anyone, but times always change, and definitely there feels like there's a change in the education industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that he's leading that, and I hope the whole educational industry, as far as property is concerned, which is where he's coming from, really changes. And I think it will change for the better. I think he's going to be leading that movement in the same way as we're leading movements in many ways, aren't we? And it's one of the other things that I think that we should highlight. It's coming soon, isn't it, Chris? As a quick signpost, is we know how completely ill-fitting the educational system is for kids these days, and in a complex and increasingly challenging, complicated, changing world, the education system hasn't changed with that. So we are now delighted to say we've started work now. We started recording now some of the content for Wealth Builders for families. And we're very much looking forward to sharing that in the coming weeks. So if you're someone who feels passionate about educating kids, and there'll be content for, in due course, not all in one go, but there'll be content for kind of primary school age, there'll be content for secondary school age, and there'll be certainly content for young adults who often face the world with a completely different set of challenges, don't they, with student debt and consumer debt and then mortgage debt. So, we'll definitely be creating some lessons for that. So if you're passionate about educating kids and you want to participate and help us, we're going to be beta testing the program pretty soon. Or if there's anything that you want to fight and change in the wealth building industry, there's something you feel passionate about, then get in touch and let us know, because we don't mind getting on somebody else's soapbox, do we, Chris?
No, not at all. And if you're listening now, if you're not already connected to Wealth Builders in some way, then probably the easiest step, if you're on Facebook, is just search for Wealth Builders, or one word, and join our free community there. We actually posted a picture a couple of weeks back of yourself and Neil Moggan, who's a co-creator of the Wealth Builders for Families program, and lots of people commenting under there saying that they're really looking forward and would love to kind of contribute and help us out with that.
Mm-hmm, definitely. So that's another thing that we're bringing change, and really change is really quite important to be flexible enough to do that, because in all aspects, life is constantly battering us with changes. And if you stick to something that you think is working, then it doesn't work. One of anything is not independence. One of anything, I'm afraid, is dependence. One job, one form of wealth building, usually the stock market. People over-depend on things. So it's having a raft of things, having the flexibility to change. As I said earlier on, being slightly mad allows you to be flexible enough to respond as you see the changes coming.
Well, we hope you enjoyed listening to today's episode. And Kevin, we will catch up same time, same place next week.
Until then, my friend, see ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget that we are constantly updating our resources inside the Wealth Builders membership site to help you create, build, and protect your wealth. Head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership right now for free access. That's wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.